thank you very much for taking the time to check out this video. This is Paul Taubman with 9.connects. And the purpose of this video today is to give you an overview of a template set that we have created and have made available to anybody who would like to have it. It is free of charge. It is a template based on Altium Designer, and it is a project template that contains a number of files along with it. I'll just give a little bit of caution here that if you are new to Altium Designer, I would recommend that you become a little more versed in the tool before you tackle this template set because it does go into some features that are not normally introduced to beginners. But if you are somebody who's well versed in it, I think this will be a great template set for you to build upon. And of course, we obviously know that you're going to want to modify it to your heart's content, and that's fine. But let's take a look at what we've got over here that we are providing to you in this template. So we are providing an entire project. There is this PRJ PCB file. We did set up some variants. I'll show how to disable that in a moment if you don't want those. And we also gave you a number of schematic sheets along with that. There's also the fabrication and assembly drawings from the Draftsman tool or Draftsman editor. And we also have the PCB doc as well. We also have two out job files here that have been set up, along with a schematic library and a PCB library of a handful of things that are related to all projects. So we'll talk about each one of these things over here. So let's start off with the lead sheet here in this project template. So you can see that on this lead sheet we have a couple of things, but the one thing we don't have in here is an SCH.dot file. So we are not using the schematic overlay that a lot of people like to use. We find it to be a little bit frustrating. So obviously you have to have access to it, and then you have to update it for each of the sheets. It's just a lot easier to make these things in such a way that they come from the library instead. That's at least the approach we took. Now, could you take this and turn it into an SCH.dot file? You certainly could. So what do we have over here? Well, the bottom over here that you see, this is the main title block. There's two title blocks. There's this main one, and then there's an alternative one that we do provide. This comes from the library. And what you're also seeing over here is textual information that is actually from project parameters. Now, I'm going to go into a little more detail about that here in just a moment. One of the neat things about Altium Designer is that if you set up what's called a project parameter, you can use that project parameter in the PCB library, the schematic library, the schematics, the PCB layout, Draftsman, and even out job files as well. And so that's what we're relying on, is that we have one central location for all the parametric data we want for our project. And when we change that, this stuff will update automatically. And I'll show you where and how this kind of all comes together. So let's take a look at this one over here. This one's called doc name. And you'll notice that anything that requires some type of change to it, we've put into the brackets. So doc name would require some type of change to it. You'll also notice over here that if I click on doc name, and I go to text, well, what does it say? It says equal block project name. So the intention here is not to just blow this away and put in some text that has no relationship to a project parameter. The intention over here is to know what project parameter it is so that you can go into the PRJ PCB, go into project options, and in project options, you'd go into parameters, and all of your parameters are located in one location. And this is really important because, as you may know, you can have parameters in the library, obviously component parameters, but you can also have parameters in the document as well. And so instead of scattering them all over the place, it's just easier to have them in one location. That's exactly what we did over here. Now, taking a look at this for a moment, you'll notice that there is a prefix. And so what we decided to do is call it block. And the reason we didn't call it SCH is because this block information is project information which can be used in the PCB. You wanted to use it there. It also is being used in the Draftsman tool as well. So that's why we called it block, because of a title block. And that's the prefix we gave. And we also wanted to put these prefixes in there so you could find things a little bit easier. Originally, when we put this together, we just put together a bunch of names. And then we found it kind of difficult because we really weren't even sure if the name, going back a couple days later, and you looked at it and you're like, well, wait a minute, is that an Altium system level parameter? And there are a number of them that we use. Or is this one that we have in the project? And so that's why we went in here and purposely did this. There's also a set of them for Draftsman as well. So these would be specific to the Draftsman tool. Not that they couldn't be used elsewhere, but we set them up because we needed to use them in Draftsman. And we also have the sheet names over here as well. Now, obviously, we gave you 9 sheets, and of course, the first 2 of them are ones that we formatted and with additional information. And of course, there's the back page as well. But these you can set up as you see fit. You don't need to have all of them. You can delete them as you need to. You can add them if you need to as well. And of course, you can see that we have some default values over here. And again, anything that we felt is something to prompt you for a change, that's what we would want you to change by having the brackets there available. So again, when I clicked on this one, I already forgot what this one was. So what was this one? Doc name. This was block project name. I go into my, go over here and do project options. So block project name under parameters. And then if I go to project name, and I change this here. So let's just call this one NDC demo. And I press OK, and I press OK again, then this one should have shown up as the block project name. So let's try that one more time here. I'm not sure why we didn't get that. Oh, I gave it the wrong name. Silly me. So, and that's what happens if you change this out. So I do apologize. I put it in the wrong location, but a good learning lesson. So let's do project. So if you do see something like that, then that means it probably does not have some type of correspondence over here. What I was supposed to do is change it over here on the value, not the name. All right. So kind of a good point. I wasn't planning on doing that. It was not an intentional demonstration, but I'm okay with that because we all learned something. So I'll press OK. And if I bring this back here and I press OK on this, then we now says NDC demo. And again, if I want to do for the rev, I'd click on this here, and I can see it's block rev, go back into the project options, and I change it. Now, of course, if this is used somewhere else, it will show up elsewhere. In fact, it does right down over here as well. So the intention is not to keep changing each one of these things individually, if you can, because on this one here, you wouldn't be able to do that since it's from the library. But on if you change one, then it's going to change and it's going to propagate across all of them in the project itself, and that's the intention of it. So this is the first page. You've got the main title block, and the main title block, what does it contain? Something for your logo, the block company names, your address over here. This is kind of that disclosure you put over here. So if you put the name of your company in here, it will automatically show the name properly on this here. And you can set this up as you see fit. You can always change this because, again, it's in the library if you want that. And you just kind of run with it over here. So we'll look at this in the library for a little bit more in just a moment. But I think you got the idea of how the first page is. Now, just as a side note, this over here, this main title block does come from the library. This was just simply written in. And these over here were drawn in. So if you don't like this to be drawn in and you want this to be a part of the library, there's nothing stopping you from basically copying this back into the library itself. So let's take a look at page 2 on this. So this is the block diagram here. This is where you would also put, possibly if you're doing hierarchical design, this would be your top level design. Now we put this over here just to kind of remind you that you could take a picture of it if it's coming from another tool and place it in here as well. So however how you want to use it. Now you may not even want this, right? Especially if you're not using a hierarchical design, maybe you don't care about it, or the design is so small it doesn't make sense to have a block level diagram in there. So it's up to you. It's not required to keep this. You do note that we created a smaller version of the title block over here as well. So that's in the library, which again we'll show you in a few minutes. As for the rest of these just have been formatted with the title block down here below. And let's jump over the back page because the back page has a few things that might be of some interest to you. So these are things that we threw in there that projects would generally want to have. Not everything on here you may want to have, but it is, they're based on projects in general. So for example, a beer board PCB. And this is something that people tend to forget to add to their bill of materials, but you have to remember that a bare PCB is actually a purchasable item, and it's a custom component, right? You're customizing this particular component. And the other reason we put this in here is so that it gives an example when we go into the active BOM, which I'll show you here in just a moment. There is also the PCB in copper. Okay, so I made it look like this over here, because you can draw that type of stuff in there. But this would actually put the PCB in the copper, and you don't even have to do anything more than fill out the project parameter for it to work. The fiducials, so 3 on each side, that's generally the call that they want you to do. There's also various silks here, and I know there's others here, and some of them may not even be applicable to you, but we added them in just to kind of demonstrate the ability to do this. So let's talk about this bare PCB and the BOM listing for a moment. So there is an active BOM in here, and here it is. This is the BOM doc. And the reason we put this in here is to give an example of a manual solution. So a lot of times if you use the BOM doc, you already have some type of supplier information that the active BOM is just going to simply grab off of. But here we have a bare PCB, and if you have a manufacturer that sells direct, or you've got a fabricator, well, the part choices is going to work. So you have to do what's called a manual solution. So when you do that, you go down here and you add the solution, and you'd say create manual solution. And that's what we did here for you already. And the reason we did that was so that you would have, if we drop down this over here and edit it, then you would have an idea of what to put in here. And so that's what we did. So we didn't have a fabricator listed already, so we just put the general information if you wanted to use this for the fabricator. Okay, but this is information that doesn't travel with the component per se. This is information that normally comes from a part choice or by you typing it in manually. Since this is a manual solution, you'll have to type it in, but at least we gave you some prompts for that. So there you go. And that's what we have over here. Let's jump on over, before I jump over the PCB doc, not that there's much in it, and we'll tell you why, but I do want to jump over to the PRJ PCB for a moment to make another comment about it. So in project options, obviously we put all these parameters in here, but this is the only tab we changed. We did think about making a couple of other changes to these tabs here, and we realized that would just create more confusion. So all the other things like your error reporting defaults, your class generation defaults, your generate rooms, we did not touch those. So, and we did a lot of hemming and hawing because there's some features we kind of like and things we don't want to have, but we said to ourselves, no, let's just use this for the parameters and leave this up to you if you want to change your outjob files, your project options accordingly. So there we go. All right, let's go to the PRJ PCB. Actually, we're going to go to the PCB doc. There we go. Go to the PCB doc and let's open this up. All right, so on the PCB doc, what did we not change? We did not change any rule because we know what rules you need. We did not change the board shape because we don't know the shape of your board, and that's based on every given project that you have to do. And we didn't change the layer stack up. Again, that's going to be something that's going to be personal to what you guys need to do on your board. We did push our ECO over those things that we showed you on the back page. So you can see that's what they look like over here. And that's really all we did. There is one other exception to that. We did bring in the mechanical layer list that we have provided in a couple of our webinars. So a couple of years ago, we did a webinar based on mechanical layers, and we came up with a set of mechanical layers based on what we thought we had need for. About a year later, about a year ago, we changed it to a Rev 2 because a lot of the layers we had picked weren't conforming with Octopart or Altium's libraries. So we decided to make sure that they did conform to that. And that's what we did is we loaded this in. So the PCB library and the PCB layout have our mechanical layer list in here. Now, if you don't want our mechanical layer list, and all you need to do is you can go to one of your existing projects and you can export that mechanical layer list, and then you can bring it in. So there's the export mechanism. It's a .stackup file, and then there's an import mechanical layers, which is going to look for that .stackup file, and it will change these things out. And of course, that's something you want to do from the get-go. You don't want to make these changes midway when you're already in a project. So that's what we did here for the PCB doc. Since I mentioned the libraries, let's just take a quick look at those here. So here is the PCB library, the PCB lib. So if we go to the PCB library, all those things that you saw are already here. And of course, you have special strings. So if the project name was brought in fact, you see this here. So this one here is literal, and then the rev. If we change the rev, then this would actually fill in with the rev, and it's being put on the top layer. And then these various logos that we've thrown in here as well, and an example of a fiducial. So that's pretty much what you've got. Now, of course, with this template, the intention of the libraries is to provide those so that you can put them in your own libraries. But if you want them to tag along with the project, there's not going to be a problem with that. The template library, so let's, the schematic template library. So here's again the various pictures that we made. Some of these, like this one, is mechanical. That means that they are not there's no footprint representation, but they would be put in the bill of materials. We go over here to the SCH library list here. Here's your fiducial, you're just basically seeing all the symbols that you already saw on the back page here. But let me take a moment to look more at the title block here. It's really zoomed out. I got to change that in the preferences, but nothing we can't fix here by zooming in. So you can change your logo, and of course, to get any of these graphics in here, this would be a place graphic, and then you can put it in there. The company name and all this other stuff has been set up again for the PRJ PCB. So as long as you have the PRJ PCB file and it's got all the parametric information, this stuff will just fill in. But this is where you would make these edits. So if you're not happy with what we provided here, you're like saying, well, it's kind of cool, but I want to change this up, or I want to make it different. I want to change the font. This is where you're going to do that. Now, as I mentioned earlier, you can see things that like the document name that come from Altium Designer and not from our project parameters. So things like document name and current date are system level Altium parameters that we can't control. We can use them, but Altium controls those within its code. One of the things I did add to this, I always thought was kind of interesting, is that a lot of times people use what's called current date. And that's fine and dandy, but I'd also like to know when the project actually got started. So that's why you see two dates over here, because this is an Altium system parameter, and that system parameter is going to just pick up whatever the date is on your system, as opposed to the start block date, which would be fixed. We also did add in the cage code as well. If you don't need that because maybe you're not working with military, you can remove that. So this is all changeable. All these are just blocks, right? I can take this block over here and I can stretch it out, or I can move it. And that's how I did this here. And these were just, some of this is just straight up text. It's not a text that gets changed. It's set the way it is. I'm going to do a Control Z to bring this in here, but you can change the block sizes. You can do whatever you want with it. It's very, very flexible. So there it is. One side note, I did design this in such a way that this will fit into the Altium A size sheet. It should fit in cleanly. If not, you can always go in here and make those changes. But of course, our example here is using B size sheets. Let's take a look at the title block abbreviated. So this is an example of the abbreviated block. Again, change it to your heart's content if you need to do so. So there is the library. Let's take a look at some of our documentation files here. So like the fabrication PCB drawing and the assembly drawings. Let's bring these up here. So we've set these up in such a way that they do pull from the PCB document. If you're familiar with Draftsman, it's kind of neat. It simply pulls information from the PCB doc as necessary. So we did set this up. Do you change it? We hope you would, right? There is a title block in here. Now the interesting thing about Draftsman does not pull from the library. So this is real in real time. So just be a little careful with this one. This is not, you don't have the protection of the library where you've got to go in the library and do an update. This one you change right on the sheet. So you can change that as necessary. And if you need to, then you just copy and paste it to the subsequent sheets. There is a list over here of various fabrication notes. These are just ones that we've found throughout time. They may not all be applicable to you, so make sure you look through this, talk to your fabricator about it. Don't just take this blindly. Okay, so that's just the only recommendation we'll make there. There's your layer stack legend. There's transmission line structure table if you're doing high-speed design. It's a newer feature in Altium Designer with the stack up. And then there's also a view here as well. Now, of course, this is the 4x6 default board that Altium always starts with in their project. And so as a result of that over here, you can see that it's kind of large. Now, we did say do not scale drawing. So if you don't like that over here, you can turn that off because these can be scaled rather easily if you wish to do so. You just click on it, go to the very top of the property, turn off custom scale, and then you can go scale 1:1 if you need to do that. And then you can give yourself a side view. And of course, if there's other things you need to put in here, feel free to do so. All those things are done here in the place table. And they've added a couple of things, but if you're interested in the Draftsman tool, a couple of years ago, we did a webinar on this. Take a look at it because even though they've added a few more features to this, what I talked about in that webinar is still very applicable. So that's what you can do here for the fabrication drawing. And the assembly drawing pretty much follows suit as well. We really didn't change anything dramatically here. Again, look at the assembly notes, make sure that they are viable for your project. The block here is very, very similar. In fact, all we just do is change a few things here. But by the way, some of these are also project parameters. So if you look here, you'll see text equals draftsman title assembly. So you go back to your PRJ PCB if you wanted to change this here. So if you are going to make changes to this, do click on them before you do it. If you see an equal sign there, that's an indication that you may need to look at the PRJ PCB project options to see if there's something you can change there rather than just blowing it away and typing it in. Okay. And that's really what these are over here, just different angles. Let's take a look at the assembly out jobs and the fabrication out jobs. So we've got these two files over here. We put a lot of effort and time into making sure that this would organize itself very neatly underneath the project. Now, by default, in the out jobs file, if you go and you create one of these new containers, then it will automatically say release manage. We changed it to manually manage, so we specifically put it into the project. So if you are trying to use these for Altium 365 Pro, I'm not sure if Altium 365 non-Pro is going to be able to use these things, but definitely Concord Pro, then and you're trying to set up these things as templates, just be aware that these have been set up for manual release, not for the release mechanisms that these products like Concord Pro and Altium's A365 might have. So if we click on this here and I'm going to do a change, just notice that the way we set this up is, again, we actually use project parameters to help build this, and that's what you can see down here. So the way these would work is that you would have a project outputs in your project, you would have assembly, so the fabrication would show fabrication. Underneath assembly, you'd see a folder called assembly drawing, and this would be the name of this PDF. Now, of course, if you have the block company name and the document number and the rev in there, that's exactly how it's going to come out. These are just simply placeholders that we have in the PRJ PCB project options file. So there you go. And we did that for assembly drawings, bill of materials, pick and place, schematic prints, test point report as well. If you don't like any of those, hey, you can modify it to your heart's content and remove it. Let's go to the fab one just for a moment. So the fab one, what do we have? Again, it's very similar setup. So let's go to change here, and you'll see that it's, again, same directory, project outputs for this project, fabrication folder, and then the subfolder for the specific thing. And again, we are using the project parameters to put this whole thing together. So what are we giving you here? You got the 3D prints, you have your DRC report. Some people may not want that. You can remove this or change it to your heart's content. Fabrication drawing, okay, which is the draftsman and the fabrication files. So we set this one up to do Gerber NC drill and the Protel one here. So I think we also did an ODB, yeah, we did ODB++ as well. So if you're only going to do one of them, you don't need to have both, and you can remove one of them as you see fit. And we also did put the net list separately. If you're doing Gerbers, you obviously have to provide the net list as well. But the net list is also for continuity checks. So if you do ODB++, I guess you would have the net list in there, but we do generate it in case you need it above and beyond the fabrication files themselves. So there it is. And then lastly, to show that we did also provide a BOM template. This is a template that I believe in the assembly jobs it does point to. So if you create the bill of materials from here, it will use this Excel sheet. Let me bring that Excel sheet up so you can see it. And so this is the template that it's going to point to. It is a part of the project, and it will fill it in accordingly. So if you don't want that or you have your own, you can change that as well. So I think that this pretty much covers the template set that we're providing you. There is also kind of a README document. I didn't call it README, but it's called the 9.connects project template set. And you can take a look at this, and I've tried to capture the key points of all of this that I've just discussed here today. So this also comes with it. So I hope that this will help you out, and we certainly would like to have feedback. So feel free to add that feedback into the comments. We know that this is Rev A, and this has only been shared amongst 3 of us, and I'm pretty sure you're going to find things that are incorrect, or you're going to find things that can be improved, and we want to know about that. So with that, thank you very much for your time, and I hope this works out really well for you. And we hope that you'll check out our other videos here at 9.connects.